So in the previous videos where I was explaining the difference between Oyeku and Eji Ogbe, and that I was explaining the difference between that Jammah, there are two types of Jammah, a figure called Jammah, or there are two types of Populus, because Populus is the same thing as what Jammah in Eastern Geomancy. Why in Ifa tradition, you either call it Oyeku or you call it Eji Ogbe in Ifa tradition. But in Eastern Geomancy, this figure is called Jammah, while in Western Geomancy or in Latin, it's called Populus. So in the previous video I said earlier, I said that in Ifa tradition that this figure has two different names, and because of that, it's a two different figure but written in the same way. So I explained the reason why it is being called two different names and how it is two different figure at the same time. I explained in that video. So now I then explained that we also have the same thing in geomancy, that this figure is called Jammah, but there is no second name for it in geomancy, but we have it in geomancy. That a figure like this figure now is called Jammah. Now if it is in geomancy, this figure is called Oyeku. This figure is also Eji Ogbe. But if we will call it Eji Ogbe, or if we call it Oyeku, or we call it Eji Ogbe, depend on the house to which we found it. I think you understand this, what I'm just explaining, very well if you watch the previous video. But if you did not watch the previous video, you can still understand this video, because I'm just trying to refresh your memory, because I want to talk about something different from what I've said earlier, but it has something to do with what I've discussed earlier. That is why I'm repeating or refresh the memory in case you have watched that previous video. So now in that previous video I talked about that we have Oyeku and we have Eji Ogbe figure. So in geomancy as well, we have what we call Jammah, and let me just use a better word. We have Jammah as a figure and we have Jammah as a neutral figure. So when you see a Jammah, in the previous video I said when you find Jammah between house 1 and house 8, when that figure called Jammah Populus appear between house 1 and house 8, it is called Jammah, which is also known as Oyeku. But if this figure is found between house 9 to house 16, it is or Eji Ogbe. It is called Eji Ogbe, or you call it a neutral figure. Now, in that previous video, I said Jammah is not always interpreted the same way, depend on the house to which you find it. The way you interpret this same figure, if it is found between house 1 to house 8, is different from the way you will interpret it when it is found between house 9 to house 16, which is the main reason for this video. I want to explain, because some people might be asking that, since it's a figure, then how does the interpretation difference comes in? How does the interpretation difference comes in? Because I said between house 1 to house 8, the way you interpret Jammah is different from the way you interpret it between house 9 to house 16. Then the question that somebody might want to ask that, how do we interpret it differently if you find it in any of the houses? Now, before I tell you how to interpret this figure differently when finding and between those houses, before I explain that, let me quickly say something here. For the fact that you might be hearing this for the first time doesn't mean that maybe I'm the first person to be talking about it. Some people know about this, some scholars also knows about it, but they don't talk about it, and that is why it is not commonly explained out there, or that's why it is not commonly, or it's not well known. And the reason why it is not well known, or the reason why most of these scholars don't talk about it, is because these differences that I'm about to talk about is usually used for high level of findings, high level of with some questions that are very, very highly spirituals. Then I start, some questions that are very, very, I don't know how to make you understand, but it's for high level of questions. And by the time I tell you how to interpret it differently, you will understand what I mean by it depends on some question before these things comes to play, before these things as matters. Now, the question is now, what I want to explain in this video is what is different between the Jammah, this figure when found between house 1 to house 8 and house 9 to house 8 is different. First of all, there are difference in terms of their name. Now I will then explain the interpretation difference. They are different in terms of them because if you found between house 1 to house 8, it is called Jammah. Why when it is found between house 9 to house 16, it is called a neutral figure. Is what a neutral figure. Now, how does the interpretation their meanings comes to play, or how does that has effect in the interpretation level? Now, like I said, it depends on the level of the question, the kind of question that would then all these things we ask meaning depending on the level of question. But let me paint a picture. Let's say this German is found in house 8. It's usually talked about that were sorry, when it's found in house 7, it's usually talked about house 7 is house of what? Partner. So usually talks about two partners. It usually talks about two partners. That's why it's called no, when I was explaining that previously, I said this Jomo, this Populus is between house 1 to house 4, but it is extended to house 8 as well. You understand? So when it's in house 7 and it's talking about two partners, I know there are sometimes that some people will tell you that this person you're supposed to marry two people. Sorry, you're supposed to have more than one partner. You understand? There are scholars or geometrists that will tell that this person, you are supposed to have two partner. When Jomo found in house 7, it's usually one of the things that usually say that a person can have more than one partner. But some people maybe they hear something, they begin to work towards it. Maybe somebody is not interested in two partner or more than one wife or more than one partner. But maybe they hear that the diviner tell them, they begins to work towards it. When this German is found in ourselves and is talking about two partner, this kind of partner is not necessary. It's based on your choice. If you like, if you like, it will come to pass. If you like, it's on your choice. It's not something that will necessarily this person. It's not so that it is not saying that necessarily this person must have two partner or that the person we have two partner. But let's say your question is about partner and you now found it between house 9 to house 8, and the domino is now this figure. Maybe the reason why you ask the question is about partner, is about relationship, and the domino of that figure now happens to be to this Jammah, this Populus, and it now happens to be between house 9 to house 16. That means talking about this person, it is highly very good, it is highly important, highly recommended for this person to have more than one partner. It is highly recommended, so much recommended that this person should have more than one partner, because it is Eji Ogbe. But when it is in between house 1 to house 8 and it's about relationship you're asking about, he said that it's not necessary. It's just like two people met. I don't know if you understand that two people are just together, that the querent needs just to pick whatever. It's just based on the querent choice. If you like it and decide to, it's not something that is necessary. But if it is house between house 9 to house 8, sorry, between house 9 to house 16, and it is Jomo and happens to be Domiro, and the question is centered on what relationship, he's saying that it is highly recommended, it's highly beneficial, it's highly good. In fact, the tendency that it will happen is very, very high, except the person doesn't just want to make it open or making it secretive something. The tendency is very, very high, except the person is being constraining himself so much that will not come to pass. But when it is found between house 8 to something, house 7, 1 to house 8, the tendency is based on choice. You have your whatever you like. Understand? So I just decided to use this video to differentiate for you to understand that this thing, apart from the fact that they have meanings in terms of their names, that it is called Eji Ogbe, it is called Oyeku, it is called Jammah, and it is called neutral figure. It also has interpretation difference. The way we interpret Jammah when it's found in house 1 to house 8 is different from the way we interpret it from when it's found between house 9 to our 16. I hope I'm able to make this clarification more clear to some people who are more inquisitive or who are more curious to understand this. So I hope I'm able to explain this better. So thank you for watching the video. May God bless you miraculously.